Can you imagine what the Monster High characters would look like if they were biologically accurate? If we took their traits completely literally, their cute, colorful, and cheerful designs would turn into absolute abominations. And since you guys loved the last video on their realistic redesigns, this time we'll be looking at new versions that are much closer to what these creatures would biologically be in real life, based on the monsters and supernatural beings they're inspired by. We're kicking things off with Claudine, a fan favorite for a huge chunk of the Monster High fandom. Her original design is mostly humanized with a few wolf-like traits, but in this version, she ditches the human look almost entirely to become a truly fierce and terrifying creature. Her face is completely transformed, featuring a massive jaw packed with razor-sharp teeth, piercing red eyes, and claws that could easily tear through any living thing in front of her. Her legs and feet are abnormally long, which would probably let her run long distances at incredible speeds, especially when hunting down prey. She also has a huge tail, typical of a fully wild wolf. Despite this transformation, I really love that she still wears her original outfit, her signature hair, and even her piercings. These details make me think these versions just show the characters with more biologically realistic bodies, but they probably still have their original personalities and tastes. Without a doubt, this version of Claudine is one of the best designs, perfectly turning her into a terrifying creature without completely stripping away what makes her recognizable. Next up is Twyla, who we know is inspired by the Boogeyman. Her original design doesn't really give off Boogeyman vibes though. In fact, most of us would say she strays pretty far from the figure she's based on. This redesign, however, completely flips that perception and finally turns her into a being worthy of the legend. She now has a genuinely unsettling figure with massive eyes staring right at the viewer and a smile full of sharp teeth that look ready to swallow a body whole. Her limbs are also wildly elongated, especially her arms, which look way longer than her own legs, giving her an even more unnatural appearance. Like Claudine, Twyla has incredibly long, sharp claws, which she definitely uses to catch and gut her victims before dragging them into the darkness. Plus, her body is almost pitch black, like a creature spawned straight from the shadows. Her look gives off heavy analog horror vibes, that kind of uncomfortable terror that feels like it's watching you through the screen and makes you want to look away immediately. Despite everything, Twyla still keeps most of her clothes, her hair, and even some details from her original look. Honestly, it's a little funny seeing such a disturbing creature wearing basically the same outfit as her Monster High version, but this contrast is exactly what makes the redesign so recognizable and deeply unsettling. We finally get to Draculaura, one of the most beloved characters in the Monster High community. Her original design is known for being cute, elegant, and stylish, complete with her iconic pigtails, but this redesign almost entirely wipes out that adorable look, turning her into a genuinely terrifying vampire. One of the most eye-catching details is the heart-decorated blood bag she's holding, a clever nod to the mix of her romantic personality and her vampiric nature. Even though this version of Draculaura might not be allowed to drink blood straight from humans, it looks like she found a much more sinister alternative to feed herself. Her face channels the oldest, most disturbing depictions of vampires, featuring an unsettling glare, an almost corpse-like expression, and massive, sharp fangs she definitely uses to pierce her victim's skin. Her mouth is partially stained with blood, meaning she probably just fed a few moments ago. She also has ridiculously long, dangerous claws that, interestingly enough, are still covered in blood. This implies she doesn't just use her fangs to attack, but can also shred her victims if they try to escape. This redesign definitely turns one of Monster High's sweetest characters into a creature you'd never want to bump into at night. Moving on to Frankie, who actually has one of the less terrifying designs in this collection, though that doesn't mean her look is any less deeply disturbing. A huge chunk of her body is stitched, bandaged, and rebuilt with pieces that clearly belong to different bodies, like none of them were originally made to fit together. We can even see that some patches of her skin are completely different colors. This detail really drives home the idea that Frankie was pieced together from various corpses. The left side of her face still looks relatively human and recognizable, but the other half is incredibly eerie. Her pitch black eye with a tiny white pupil gives her a horrifying expression, while her pale, lifeless skin makes her look like a walking corpse. This look totally honors her namesake, since we know Frankie is inspired by Frankenstein's monster, a creature built from human parts and brought back to life through science. Interestingly, unlike the other characters, this redesign doesn't have massive claws or overly sharp teeth. Because of that, it makes me think Frankie might not actually be a hostile creature in this universe. It's possible her appearance is only terrifying because of how she was made, not because she's a threat to anyone. Still, standing in front of her and realizing that every part of her body belongs to someone else would be an experience you wouldn't easily forget. Now let's look at Operetta, whose original design is heavily inspired by the Phantom of the Opera. Because of this, we know half of her face is supposed to be deformed, but in the original show, that trait hardly looks creepy. In this redesign, things are totally different. The entire left side of her body looks charred, rotting, and partially decayed, bringing her much closer to a truly horrifying version of the Phantom. Her left eye immediately stands out from the rest of her body. Since it's completely exposed and has no eyelid, she probably can't even blink, forcing her to keep it open all the time. The same goes for her unsettling smile, which looks completely forced, but it's not an intentional expression, it's just a result of losing the flesh and most of the muscles on that side of her face, making it almost impossible to move normally. The most disturbing part of her design is the massive contrast between the two halves. While one side of her face looks like a burnt, rotting corpse, the other still looks like a cheerful, elegant, energetic girl. She even keeps her signature red hair, her outfit, and several elements from her original design. This contrast makes Operetta look trapped between two completely different appearances: a charismatic, music-loving girl and a disfigured creature trying to hide her most terrifying side. Without a doubt, this redesign captures the inspiration behind the character way better and shows us exactly why someone with a face like that would need to wear a mask. Next is Cleo. We know her original design is inspired by an Egyptian mummy, but aside from some bandages and small outfit details, she basically just looks like a normal human. In this redesign, however, she finally looks like a real mummy that's been locked inside a tomb for thousands of years. Her body's completely petrified and skeletal, with incredibly thin limbs and skin dried out over the centuries. The bandages that once covered her whole body have rotted away over time, and now there are only a few scraps hanging off her, leaving most of her mummified figure exposed. Her face is also pretty disturbing, looking like a cross between a mummy and a living corpse. Her eyes are misaligned and completely out of place, and she's missing several teeth, probably from decaying over time. Even her expression looks stiff, as if her facial muscles dried up centuries ago, and she can barely move them. Despite her terrifying look, Cleo still keeps the elegant and glamorous style she's always had in the show. She keeps some of her clothes, her gold accessories, and that attitude of someone who still feels like royalty, even if she looks like she just crawled straight out of an ancient Egyptian tomb. Because of this, I'm sure this version of Cleo still has the same snobby, confident personality she has in the original series. After all, not even thousands of years of decomposition are enough to make her lose her style. Moving on to Spectra. Her original design is supposed to be inspired by a ghost, but her look in the show doesn't fully sell that idea. Aside from some physical traits and her supernatural powers, she just looks like a partially transparent girl, not necessarily a real spirit from the beyond. This redesign, on the other hand, completely transforms her into a ghostly apparition. Her mouth is held wide open, as if she's trapped in an endless scream, while her body is shattered and split into several independently floating pieces. Some areas are even starting to fade away, as if Spectra is struggling to hold on to a stable physical form in the world of the living. Her pure white eyes are also super unsettling. They have no pupils, making her look like a hollow spirit that's been wandering between both worlds for way too long. Plus, the lack of defined legs really adds to the feeling that her body is slowly disappearing, leaving behind nothing but a spectral figure. This redesign absolutely nails Spectra's ghostly nature. While she might still keep her nosy personality and her love for gossip, her new look turns her into a presence you'd never want to meet face to face while walking down the halls at night. Next up is Ghoulia, who easily has one of the most disturbing designs in this whole universe. We know the character is inspired by a zombie, but her original appearance barely gets that across, since she looks more like a regular student with a few undead-themed quirks. This redesign completely flips her look, turning her into something way more terrifying than a standard zombie. Her body is extremely skinny and deformed, with limbs so elongated she probably walks in a bizarre, unnatural way, like she can barely control her own movements. She also has massive, incredibly sharp claws that could easily rip apart any creature that crosses her path. But the creepiest part is her massive jaw, unhinged in an impossible way and packed with teeth, which she definitely uses to devour other beings. It honestly looks like her body is adapted solely for hunting and feeding. The way she stares right at the viewer makes her look even more uncomfortable, like she knows we're there and is getting ready to pounce. Even though she keeps some of her original hair and clothes, her figure is almost unrecognizable. Ghoulia definitely has one of the most successful designs in this universe, finally turning her into a real, terrifying undead creature that's much closer to the true nature of a zombie. Now we move on to Abbey, a character we all recognize for her strong personality and signature way of speaking in the show. Even though her original design includes some elements meant to tie her to the monster she represents, her look barely manages to capture the actual terror a creature inspired by the yeti should cause. But this redesign completely changes that. Abbey now has a much larger, bulkier, and powerful build, like her body is built to survive extreme mountain conditions and fight off anything that invades her territory. Her face is completely transformed too, featuring a massive jaw full of sharp teeth and pitch black eyes with tiny purple pupils that stand out in a deeply unsettling way. Plus, her face loses almost all of its human features, taking on the look of a true beast. The rest of her body is covered in thick, heavy fur, much closer to what a real yeti would have to survive the freezing temperatures. Even her arms and hands look huge, which would probably give her insane superhuman strength. Despite her terrifying transformation, she still keeps a few details from her original design, letting us instantly recognize her as Abbey. This redesign definitely represents the monster she's based on so much better, turning her into an imposing beast no one would want to run into on a frozen mountain. Finally, we have Scara, who has one of the most terrifying designs both in and out of the show. Her character already managed to cause a certain sense of fear, but when you compare her to this universe's version, that terror gets cranked up completely. In this redesign, we can see that her jaw is stretched wide open, almost like it's been detached or completely broken off her face. A horrifying scream seems to be escaping her massive mouth, probably a lot like her trademark wail from the show, but way louder and more disturbing. Her pure white eyes highlight her monstrous look even more, making her look like a hollow, out-of-control creature. On top of that, she has an insane amount of teeth, almost like she has multiple rows crammed into her jaw, ready to shred whatever gets in front of her. If this universe has shown us anything, it's that the Monster High characters can genuinely become monsters worthy of causing nightmares. Scara has one of the most disturbing redesigns of them all. But what do you guys think?